Joining me on the channel today is Sam Taylor, author of the YA fantasy We Are the Fire, out now from Swoon Reads. The book follows a pair of teen soldiers who must defeat the emperor who stole them from their families and subjugated them. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I always like to start at the beginning and explore your path to becoming a published author. What kind of kid were you?
I was a very imaginative kid. I loved books. I was always reading. I was always making up stories. I would make up stories with the toys my brothers and I would play with. I'd make up like very involved stories, reenactments of like pilgrims or Greek mythology. So I was
The
just
Pilgrims.
Yes, yeah. I made the Mayflower out of like crates that we had in my brother's room, and I was assigning like all the toys, like different historical figures. It was very involved.
That's awesome. So what other things did you make up as a kid? So you did the Mayflower, you did the Pilgrims. You probably put like little buckles on your helmet, your hats.
We didn't have the buckles. I don't know. They were wearing like the regular clothes, but I was like, this is Miles Standish. Or we made a temple out of those same crates, and like I had a Greek god or goddess in each of the rooms, and then like the other toys would like come and like pray to the gods and goddesses and make offerings. We also just had like this long-standing town running with like the different toys in my brother's room were objects in the town, and there was the mayor, and one time there was a famine, and so they were like dishing out like little like Duplo blocks as the food, and yeah.
I love it. So then, and what kind of books did you like reading as a kid?
I read kind of a bit of everything. I remember I really loved the Babysitter's Club books, and I did watch the Netflix show, and it was just such a fun trip down memory lane. I read Goosebumps. I read lots of different fantasy books. I loved folklore even as a kid. I remember I got this book from a thrift shop I just found there, and it was like full of collections of folk tales from all over the world and all through time. And they had stories from the Arabian Nights in there, and there was stories from Norse mythology and Greek mythology. And I remember going through that book over and over, just reading all the different stories and just loving like those little pieces from all over the world.
And so how did you go from being a reader who loved reading stories to wanting to write your own?
I was always kind of making up my own stories. I remember when I was in kindergarten, before I could write, I would draw stories on the inside covers of my coloring books. And as soon as I did learn how to write, I would make my own little picture books, like putting together papers in between pieces of cardboard and just coloring and writing out the stories. I was 14 when I decided that I wanted to become an author when I was an adult. So I wrote a fantasy quartet when I was in high school, and just like spent all 4 years of high school writing that. It didn't end up going anywhere. And it was a while before I knew how to actually become an author. But since I was 14, I knew that's what I want to do with my life.
So a fantasy quartet, do you have any ideas how many words you wrote on that?
I have no idea, because I would handwrite all the first drafts and sometimes the second drafts, because there was only the one computer for my whole family at the time. And so I would do all the brainstorming and the first drafts by hand, and then I would type them up. Gosh, it must have been at least 400,000 words, like that.
That's amazing for
Oh,
a
yeah. Yeah.
so you like definitely put in like because I always say you have to, or I hear you have to put in like 10 years of writing before you actually end up getting published. So
Yeah.
you probably like put in that time
Yeah.
like way early.
I
Really.
definitely have more than 10 years from the time I decided I wanted to become an author to being published. But in college, I studied creative writing and English, and the creative writing classes that I took, they were more focused on like adult literary short fiction. So I was always a YA writer and a kidlit writer. I didn't know it, but so in college I was focusing on the adult literary fiction that they wanted us to be writing. So ironically, while I majored in creative writing, I didn't actually do a lot of my own writing while I was in college and in grad school because there wasn't time for it in between all the classes and then working to pay for all my classes. But it was when I finished my master's degree that I was all, I really want to get started on this writing career. So that was when I started writing, and I had to move on from the series that I was writing in high school because it was starting to become just like kicking a dead horse, that horrible phrase. But I needed to
Yeah.
move on and try my hand at something new. So I wrote some new books and was trying to query them and wasn't getting anywhere until I finally landed on We Are the Fire. But even then, that book still had a really long journey to publication.
Yeah, well, it seems like all books have like a really long journey to
Yeah,
publication, and it's rare to
yeah.
not
This,
have a long journey.
this is not the writing path for impatient people, and I've had to learn to be very patient because I'm not naturally a patient person. I'm very like, make your goals and do these steps to get to your goals, and that's not the way publishing always works.
No, it's not. Well, I'm really curious. Can you tell us like a little bit about your high school book? Like just like a quick like little
Sure.
like what it was it about?
So it was kind of set in like a pseudo medieval England world because that was what I thought fantasy was at the time. And so there was this young teenage girl who was given this necklace from her mother that turned out to be part of this really powerful evil stone. And she had to get that piece connected back to the evil stone and then destroy the stone. And there was lots of mishaps along the way. And her she had a couple of her best friends. One was another, this girl was nobility, and one of her best friends was also nobility, but she was also best friends with the local healer's son in the nearby town. And then at some point, her cousin comes into the journey, and she also befriended this little furry forest animal that I invented for the story, kind of like a cross between a wolf and a fox that she rescued. And there was dragons as well because dragons are awesome. So there was
Yeah.
lots of sweeping epic fantasy, kind of like your typical epic fantasy tropes.
Did any of those like little ideas or any ideas from that story land in We Are the Fire or any subsequent stories that you wrote?
The first book that I seriously queried it stemmed from that first series that I wrote in high school. It was significantly changed, but it did have some of the same characters. And I queried that book. I got almost pretty close to landing an agent, but eventually I had to move on. And then We Are the Fire was the third book that I had been querying. Though I didn't get an agent with it. Readers would read We Are the Fire. My CPs, my critique partners, and my beta readers, they read it and they loved it. And so many would say, like, this is it. This is the one that's going to do it for you. But agents just weren't responding the same way. And I didn't want to give up on We Are the Fire. This book, I just had a passion for it that I didn't with my previous two manuscripts, even though I still really loved those books, since you have to love any book that you're going to spend months
Mhm.
working on. But I didn't want to give up on this one. And I'd heard about the site Swoon Reads, where writers could put their manuscript on the website. People could read it, rate it, review it, and ones that performed well on the site could get the attention of an editor at the imprint. Which is an imprint of Macmillan. And I was like, this is one of the few ways I could get into a big five potentially without an agent on my side. And I thought, well, agents are struggling to connect with this book, but readers love it. Maybe readers can help me get this book published. And they did, because here it is.
That's awesome. Do you have an agent now, or are you still unagented?
I do have an agent now. I signed with an agent on the next manuscript I was working on, but I was connected through that agent with one of the Swoon Reads authors. Incidentally, she had messaged our group. We have a Slack and a Facebook page just for the Swoon Reads authors, and she said, "Hey, one of my longtime friends who has been in publishing for about 17 years is switching over to become an agent. She's interested in starting to acquire clients, and any of you who are looking for an agent are invited to query her in advance before she officially switched over to agenting." And I was like, "Oh, I am." So I sent her a query for my Icelandic fantasy, and just to see what happened, because as I tell all aspiring authors, take any opportunity that's available to you that's a good fit, because you never know where it will lead. And she emailed me back a few days later. She said, "Iceland is one of my favorite places in the world. Please send me the whole manuscript." And then the next month she was offering. And as I spoke with her on the phone, we just clicked. And I said to myself, I was like, "This is the agent I've been looking for 4 years now." By that point, I'd been querying for 4 years, 4 different manuscripts. "This is the agent I've been looking for. I just had to wait for her to become an agent first." And in the meantime, I got to become a much better writer. I was connected with people who I think I otherwise may not have crossed paths with. So it took a lot longer, but in the end, I found the person I need to be with. And my agent, she's Ali Helligers at Stamola Literary Studio, and she's fantastic. I'm so glad that I didn't give up and I kept going until I could finally cross paths with her.
Yeah, so that just goes to show that the path to getting an agent and getting a book deal doesn't have to be like a traditional, like,
Yes.
path. There's like lots of different ways to go about it.
Yeah, my path is very
Um,
non-traditional, but just kind of fits with my whole journey, has been very non-traditional, but I hope it can inspire some other authors to keep going.
Tell us about the day that you found out you were going to be published.
So it was in the evening. It was in mid-November of 2018, and I was sitting down to write for that evening. My husband and I, we had our son, who was about 10 and a half months old by that point. And it's hard to write with such a young kid. So my husband was going to take little T out of the house for the evening and just give me some quiet time without distraction where I could write. So he was getting ready to take little T out, and I was sitting down at my desk, and I checked my email first before I dove into the writing. And I saw an email from Emily Settle at Swoon Reads saying, "We want to talk with you about your book." And I ran upstairs to where my husband was getting little T dressed, and I was like, "Oh, look at this," holding up my phone and like waving it at him. And he looks at the email, and I was like, I think they want to publish my book." And in the email, Emily said, "Please let me know. We want to speak with you over the phone tomorrow. Please let me know what time." And I'm trying to type a response, and it's like, I can't even get my hands to work. I can't pull together any words to even say. And my husband's like, "Okay, take an hour and calm down and then respond to the email." And the next day I spoke with her over the phone, and there wasn't, like, the email didn't actually say it was an offer. It just said, "We want to talk with you about the book." And I knew it was probably a book deal, but it's like, maybe they want me to revise it. I don't know. And then they'll offer. And she just started off immediately saying, "This is an offer of publication," which is really great for someone with anxiety to
Yeah.
just be clear from the start what this is about. And yeah, it was a book deal, and it came at the best possible time for me, because at the same time, I had a previous book deal that was folding about this time, because the publishing house, as I learned, it just wasn't the best fit for me. There was some communication issues. So it was at a very vulnerable point in my writing career. So having this affirmation that there was a place for me and my stories in the publishing world really gave me the boost that I needed to keep going.
And your cover is so lovely. Tell us about like when you first saw that cover.
So this cover art, it's by I hope I'm saying his name right, Bastien Lecouf de Harm, and he's a Hugo nominated artist. And when Emily told me who they got to do the cover, I was looking through his portfolio that she sent along. I felt like I was looking at story art of my world already. It just like, was spot
Yes.
on for what's going on. I'm still like in awe of how Emily was able to get such a magnificent artist for my debut. I love illustrated fantasy covers. I didn't think I was going to get to have a cover like this for my very first book. And when they sent me the cover art, I loved how fierce it is, how bold it is, and how like it encaptures the feeling of my story in a glance. I love the blue flames. They had told me about a year ago that they weren't going to have orange flames on the cover of my book because their marketing team had said that books with orange flames don't tend to sell as well as they would like. And I was like, well, the title is We Are the Fire. It's about magical fire wielding teens. You have to have fire on the cover, right? And they're all, we're going to go with blue flames. And I was like, oh, okay, which works with the plot because there is a point where Oksana's fire starts burning blue. And I was like, all right. And it's been very well received. The blue flames, they do get attention because they're unusual. And I've had so many people comment that they specifically like the blue fire. And it's created a lot of fun branding opportunities with me, as you can see from my blue wig.
Yay. What's a misconception that you had about publishing prior to being published that has now changed?
I think part of it was like how much it would challenge my writing craft. And that's not to say that, you know, I thought, oh, I have a book deal. I'm there in publishing. I have nothing more to learn because of course there's always more to learn. But I was surprised at how much it would push me to grow as an author. So I had always envisioned We Are the Fire as a duology. And even when I got the book deal, I was thinking like, well, you know, the story that I posted on Swoon Reads is just the first part of the story. And there needs to be a second part, a second book, because there's so much more to tell. And my editor agreed there was more to tell, but she challenged me to wrap it all up in one complete volume. And my initial response was like, oh, there's no way I can do this. But realizing that I'm a writer who often tends to overcomplicate my plots and my storylines, I decided to look at this as a necessary exercise in simplifying my storytelling. So, and as I went through what was done the first book, I could tell there's excess here. There's stuff that can be cut to tighten the tension and the pacing. And it became a really useful practice for me to learn how to look at a story and break it down into pieces and identify which ones do I really need to tell the story and which ones are just fluff. And there was definitely points during that revision where I thought I can't do this. There's no way I'm going to be able to make this into a book that people still want to read. But in the end, I was really proud with what I came up with, and I'm delighted to share it with people. And so it was just surprising to me that even after you get the book deal, you know, how much your editor can teach you, even when it's like outside like a formal class setting or a conference or where you would expect to be learning, and how much just the process of working through a professional round of revisions can really stretch and reshape you as a writer.
Yeah, definitely. Picture book. Tell us about it. Tell us about the plot.
So this book, We Are the Fire, it's perfect for fans of Ember and the Ashes or The Legend of Spartacus. And in it, two fire-wielding teen soldiers in love are pitted against each other as they're fighting against the Empire who kidnapped them from home. And it's full of fire magic and twisted alchemy and gray morals and lovers at odds and fierce friendships and a lot of folklore. And you can see I'm a little cute messenger bird there.
What's your favorite step? Is it drafting or revising?
Revising. It is so hard to create a story from nothing. So I definitely love revising and polishing up a story until it's something that I'm really proud to show other people.
And what do your first drafts look like?
A mess. There, I definitely plan ahead. I outline. I've started even writing like a full synopsis before my story begins. Um, but as I'm writing, I always discover parts of the story that I need to think through more. And so I'll start writing bracketed off text in the middle of the draft, and I'll just like be asking questions to myself, or I'm gonna think this through, or I'm, how do they get to this plot event? What is their motivations? And I'll just start writing brainstorming notes in the actual draft so that before I'm able to show it to anyone when I start doing my own revision, there's just sometimes it's just little lines bracketed off. Sometimes it's entire pages bracketed off where I have to go through and I'm pushing myself to think through the story, the characters, the world a lot more deeply. But yeah, they're a mess. I call them like advanced outlining or brainstorming my very rough drafts because it's essentially I'm taking the outline that I created and I'm putting it through a reality check with that first messy draft and finding out what actually works and what surprises there are for me, because even though I outline throughout the story, I inevitably come across some new ideas I never considered before, and I always follow them because that's always where I find the best parts of my story.
And are you a perfectionist or a chaos artist?
I'm a perfectionist, which is sometimes to my detriment, but
And
definitely.
do you have a huge ego, or are you humble and demure?
I don't think I have a big ego. I mean, like even as of last night when my husband, like when my books came and my husband, he's like, "Oh, you're famous now." And I was telling him about the interviews I have lined up. And I was like, "I'm glad you think that." But I was like, in the publishing world, in the grand scheme of things, I was like, I'm still really small potatoes.
Are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
Morning for sure. Been doing 5 a.m. Writers Club for years now.
Wow. I salute you. I got up, well, I set my alarm for 5 a.m. for this interview and to wake up so that I could get ready. And I definitely hit the snooze. I was like, nope, not getting out of bed. So good for you. How do you wake up early? What's your
When
tip?
that's the only time of the day that I know for sure I'll have to myself, because with the two little kiddos now, like nothing gets you out of bed faster than knowing that might be some of the only time you have that day to write. And if I don't get up and make the most of it, I don't get it back. So it's not always easy. Like, I'll be honest, there's times I am so tired. There's times I struggle to find my motivation, but I'm just like, this is my time for myself to write these stories that I need to tell. And I learned to take it and I learned to make it work. And it's been essential to keeping my writing momentum going ever since becoming a mom.
Good for you. Are you a character first writer or a plot first writer?
It really depends on the story. We Are the Fire was character first. I had the idea for Oksana. This There was this girl who could set fires, and it wasn't a power she was born with. It was forced on her, and she was having to burn for causes she didn't believe in. And from there, I had to go, how did she get these powers? Why is she burning when she doesn't want to? And just created a story around that.
Nice. Oh, what has been the best revision suggestion that you've gotten along the way?
There's been so many with We Are the Fire because the story just has gone through many, many revisions and iterations. Some that have just been really fun are this messenger bird that I mentioned. Came through a suggestion from one of my critique partners, Kim Mock, and I had this little parable that Prawn tells about this copper crown bird, and my when they start doing their own rebellion, my friend Kim, she said like they need some sort of a symbol for it, and the copper crown bird ended up becoming this larger symbol for their rebellion and a symbol of hope throughout the story. So that was would have come only through the suggestion from my friend. And then another one of my writer friends, Lindsay Hess, she's a romance writer, and she was the one I had to turn to for help when writing the kissing scenes for this book, because I'm not good at romance and I cannot write kissing scenes. And no matter what I did, they were not working. So she's a romance writer. That's her whole bread and butter. So I go to her and I'm like, Lindsay, please help me with these kissing scenes and make them work, because I don't know why they're not working. Um, and also, thanks to Lindsay, she was the one who suggested that there be some sort of a song or an anthem that the characters keep turning to. And because of that suggestion, I wrote in one sitting the Demon's Ballad that occurs throughout the book. And you'll get little pieces of it here and there until at one really pivotal point in the story, you finally see the whole thing together. And that became one of my favorite parts of the story. And it's something that would not have occurred if she hadn't made that suggestion for me.
Very cool. Have you ever feared that you would never be published?
Yes, yes, especially with this book, when I just kept getting agent rejections, and this book was everything to me, and agents just weren't even giving it the time of day. There was definitely times where I was afraid this is only ever going to be a file on my computer that no one will ever know about or care about. And even after I put it up on the Swoon Reads site, it started off with a bang, but then it seemed like things were going too slowly. And I thought, I don't think this is getting the editor's attention. I think it's just going to fizzle out. I had actually started to give up hope on it when that email came offering publication, which was a big part of why it was such a surprise. And even after that, I was querying my Iceland book and was getting more interest from agents, but still no offers. And I remember saying to my husband and some writer friends, I was like, I don't know if there is an agent out there for me. I've been querying for 4 years. I've had 4 very different books. I don't know if there is someone out there for me, not realizing that there was. That person just hadn't yet become an agent.
Yeah. Would you ever like to be famous?
I don't know, to be honest. All I want right now is for this book to do well enough that I can continue to sell other books and keep writing other books. But I know, as exciting as it is to like be on the bestseller list, and I would, if I was given that chance, I would never be like, no. But I know with the writer fame that there is, and with being like on the New York Times bestseller list, there's a lot that comes with it. And I think it really changes the dynamic of the writing career. So I would never throw away that opportunity, if it come my way. But just knowing it really, I think, does change the game. And right now, I just want to be able to keep writing and selling books.
If you could have any non-supernatural talent or ability, what would it be?
To speak any language in the world. Love learning languages, so to be able to speak and read any language.
What's your #1 language that you would love to learn, like if you could learn it tomorrow?
I'm learning a little Icelandic. I would love to be able to learn more. I'm struggling to find resources to teach me as much as I would like to learn, but that would be awesome.
What are you working on now?
Working on some middle grade, actually. I have a baking magic book I turned from YA into middle grade, full of all kinds of fun magic and shenanigans. And I'm also working on another middle grade fantasy inspired by Norwegian folklore, which has been so much fun.
Yay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the channel. It's been a delight to talk to you in person, that is. And everyone, definitely check out We Are the Fire. I put buy links below. And there it is. Thank you so much for being on the channel, Sam.
Thank you for having me.